女士们、先生们、记者朋友们，大家上午好！欢迎出席国务院新闻办新闻发布会。昨天下午中国国务院新闻办公室发表了关于中美经贸摩擦的事实和中方立场的白皮书。今天上午我们举行发布会，向大家介绍和解读白皮书的有关主要内容。出席今天发布会的有关部门负责人，商务部国际贸易谈判代表兼副部长傅自应先生，商务部副部长兼国际贸易谈判副代表王寿文先生，国家发展改革委副主任连维良先生，工业和信息化部副部长罗文先生，财政部副部长周佳怡女士，国家知识产权局副局长贺华先生，我是国务院新闻办公室副主任、新闻发言人顾伟明，大家比较熟悉了今天发布会呢，我来主持。首先我简要介绍一下白皮书的主要内容，关于中美经贸摩擦的事实与中方立场白皮书全面介绍中美经贸
of the basic facts of China-US economic relations, laid out China's policy positions regarding the China-US trade frictions, underscored the win-win nature of China-US economic and trade relations, explained the damage of the trade protectionism and trade bullying of the U.S. administration to the world economy, and demonstrated China's resolve and will to uphold its national interests and uphold multilateral trading system. The white paper is 36,000 words in Chinese. It is composed of the preamble and the main body. The white paper points out that since the establishment of diplomatic relations, China and the United States have continued to develop their economic trade relations and forged close partnership. And this relationship has not only brought benefits to the two countries, but also benefit the whole world. A sound China-US economic and trade relationship is of great importance for both countries. The current administration of the United States, by releasing Section 301 investigation report and other means, has made a series of unfounded accusations against China, which is serious distortion of the facts of China-US economic relations. The administration has stepped up tariff measures, which has caused great damage to the economic and trade relations that the two countries have developed through many years of efforts, and also put multilateral trading system and the principle of free trade in great risk. The white paper points out economic globalization is the trend of the times, and peace and development are the aspirations of the people. Economic relations between China and the United States bears on the well-being of the two peoples, and also concerns world peace, prosperity, and stability. For China and the United States, cooperation is the only right choice, and a win-win approach leads to a better future. China is firmly upholding its national dignity and core interests, advancing the healthy development of China-US economic and trade relations, upholding and advancing the reform and improvement of the multilateral trading system, protecting property rights and intellectual property rights, protecting the lawful rights and interests of foreign businesses operating in China, deepening reform and widening opening up, promoting mutually beneficial cooperation with other developed countries and developing countries, and building a community with a shared future for mankind. The white paper points out that a just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause enjoys little support. In the face of a world with growing uncertainty, instability, and insecurity, China will not forget its original aspiration. China will continue to follow the trend of the times, show the responsibility of justice, and pursue the greater good. China will be firmly upholding the multilateral trading system and advancing the reform of the global governance system. China will always work to promote world peace, contribute to global development, and uphold the international order. China will be firm in advancing the building of a community with shared future for mankind. The white paper will be published in 8 languages: Chinese, English, French, Russian, German, Spanish, Arabic, and Japanese. It will be published by the Renmin Publishing House and the foreign language press. It will be available in all Xinhua bookstores across the country. I will now give the floor to Vice Minister Fu Ziying of Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Guo. Friends from the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Yesterday, the State Council Information Office released the white paper on facts and China's position on China-US trade friction. So I would like to take this opportunity of today's press conference to give you a briefing about the contents of the white paper. As known to all, China is the largest developing country in the world, while the United States the largest developed country in the world. China-US economic and trade relationship is important not just for the two countries, but also for the stability and the development of the global economy. Since the establishment of diplomatic ties between the two countries, China-US economic and trade relations have deepened, with the interests highly integrated. The two countries have forged an interconnected relationship. It is fair to say that this relationship has delivered tangible benefits to the peoples of the two countries and the business communities of the two countries. And in the context of globalization, it has also delivered benefits to the whole world. China-US economic and trade cooperation is huge in size. The two countries are the two largest economies in the world. So, economic cooperation between the two countries huge in size. However, the two countries are different in terms of stage of economic development, social system, and cultural traditions. Therefore, it is natural for the two countries to have trade frictions. But the key is really how the two countries can enhance mutual trust, advance cooperation, and manage differences. Over the years, economic and trade relations have continued to move forward against all odds. The economic and trade relationship has become a ballast and propeller of the overall China-US relations. Unfortunately, over the recent period, the U.S. has pursued unilateralism and protectionism, introduced a host of trade restrictive measures against China, and continue to increase tariffs on imports from China. However, out of the big picture of the common interests of the two countries and the world trading order, China has been committed to resolving disputes through dialogue and consultation, and responded to the U.S. concerns with maximum patience and good faith. Unfortunately, the U.S. side has broken its promise time and again, and continued to escalate the situation, which has weighed on China-US economic and trade cooperation, and also imposed serious threat to the multilateral trading system and the principle of free trade. In order to clarify the facts of China-US economic and trade relations, explain China's policy positions on the trade friction, and push for a reasonable settlement of the issue, the Chinese government has drafted the white paper on the facts and China's positions on China-US trade friction. The white paper explained the win-win nature of China-US economic and trade relations from the perspective of trading goods, trading services, and mutual investment, and pointed out that both sides have benefited enormously from this relationship. In particular, the U.S. has gained extensive and a massive economic interest in its trade exchanges with China. It has shared in the opportunities and outcomes of China's development. The claim that the United States is being taken advantage of by China simply does not hold water. Starting from last year, the U.S. administration has made the claim that China is pursuing economic aggression, unfair trade, theft of IPR, and state capitalism, which is a distortion of the facts of China-US economic and trade relations. With ample data and facts as basis, the white paper has provided detailed analysis and clarifications on issues like how to look at the trade deficit the United States is having on China, how to look at fair trade, how to look at technology transfer between Chinese and American companies, how to look at IPR protection in China, how to look at the goal global of Chinese companies, and how to look at China's subsidy policies. At the same time, the white paper points out that the United States itself is pursuing practices and policies that impede trade and investment. For example, distorting market competition, impeding fair trade, and dividing the global industrial chain. The measures and practices introduced by the United States include discrimination against the products of other countries in violation of the principle of fair competition, restricting the normal investment activities of companies from other countries in the United States with an abuse of national security review, distorting market competition by providing massive subsidies, using massive non-tariff barriers, and abusing trade remedy measures. The white paper points out that as a main founder and a participant in the building of the post-World War international economic order and the multilateral trading system, the United States should take the lead in observing multilateral trading rules and properly handle its trade frictions with other WTO members through the dispute settlement mechanism under the WTO. However, the United States has stressed the importance of America first and taken efforts to make its domestic issue international issue and politicized economic issues. Such an approach has not only damaged the interests of China and other countries, but also tarnished the international image of the United States itself. Eventually, it will hurt the long-term interests of the United States and the American people. The white paper stresses that the world economy has just walked out of the shadow of the international financial crisis, yet recovery is not solidly based. The host of unilateral trade protectionist measures taken by the U.S. side have disrupted international economic order upset global value chain and the international division of labor, disrupted market expectations, and become the biggest factors of uncertainty and source of risks for global recovery. In the final chapter, the white paper provides systemic account of China's position. First, the Chinese government is firm in upholding the country's dignity and core interests. China does not want a trade war, but we are not afraid of one, and we will fight one if necessary. We have the confidence, resolve, and the capability to deal with all kinds of risks and challenges. No external factor can hold back China's development and progress. China has kept its door to negotiations open. But negotiations must be conducted with the precondition of mutual respect, equality, good faith, and credibility, and should not come at a price of China's right to development. Second, China is firm in promoting the healthy development of China-US economic and trade relations. The healthy and stable growth of China-US economic and trade relations meets the fundamental interests of the two peoples and the common interests of people around the world. China is willing to work in the same direction with the United States, follow the principle of mutual respect and willing cooperation, focus on economic and trade cooperation, manage economic and trade differences, and build a new China-US economic and trade order that is balanced, inclusive, and mutually beneficial in order to enhance the well-being of people of both countries. Third, China is firm in upholding and reforming the multilateral trading system. China is firm in observing and upholding WTO rules. We support open, transparent, inclusive, and non-discriminatory multilateral trading system and support necessary reform of the World Trade Organization. We support efforts to promote trade and investment, liberalization, and facilitation, and make economic globalization more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial to all. Fourth, China is firm in protecting property rights and intellectual property rights. China will keep improving its laws and regulations on IPR protection, protect the lawful IPR foreign businesses in strict accordance with the law. China will enhance its cooperation with all countries to protect IPR and also hopes that governments of other countries will step up efforts to protect Chinese IPR. Fifth, China is firmly committed to protecting the lawful rights and interests of foreign businesses in China. China is committed to building an open and transparent foreign-related legal system, improving the business environment, and providing better, higher-quality services to businesses from all countries operating and investing in China. The Chinese government pays close attention to the legitimate concerns of foreign investors and stands ready to respond to and address their specific concerns. Sixth, China is firmly committed to deepening reform and widening opening up. China will not reverse course, but only deepen its reform. China will not close its door to the world, but only open wider. China will stay firmly committed to deepening reform and widening opening up, advance the rule of law across the board, and build a socialist country under the rule of law. Seventh, China is firmly committed to mutually beneficial cooperation with other developed and developing countries. On the basis of mutual benefit, China will work with relevant trade partners to accelerate multilateral and bilateral trade negotiations and cooperation, deepen Belt and Road cooperation, and create new drivers for common development. 8. China is firmly committed to building a community with a shared future for mankind. China will continue to play its role as a responsible major country and work with all countries in the world to build an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world that enjoys lasting peace, universal security, and common prosperity. All in all, no matter what changes may take place in the international landscape, China will continue to work with the rest of the world to promote world peace, contribute to global development, and uphold international order. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Minister Fu. We will now go into the Q&A session. Please identify your media affiliation before asking the question. The floor is open.
With CCTV, the United States believes that China has conducted unfair practices to take advantage of the U.S. What is your view? And what is your view on the future prospects of China-U.S. business relations? Thank you for your question. Indeed, there has been a voice in the United States claiming that in the economic cooperation and the trade ties between China and the United States, the U.S. has been taking advantage of. I believe this is an ineffectual accusation, and it is groundless. And for the United States as well as the international community, this is totally misleading. The economic cooperation and trade between China and the United States for the past 40 years, since we established diplomatic ties, is a result of the accumulation of our friendly exchanges. And it is a strong foundation for our joint commitment to development. It is also a natural result of our complementary advantages. It is also a necessary choice for international division of labor in industries. It is also in line with the common interests of the people of both countries. After 40 years of development, the Chinese and U.S. economies are now deeply integrated and mutually interdependent. Our trade volume has reached around $700 billion US. Our two-way investment stock has exceeded $230 billion. U.S. companies in China have an annual sales revenue of over $700 billion and a profit of over $50 billion US. It is fair to say that the common interests of China and the United States far outweighs our differences. As a matter of fact, The spread in trade is only a difference in the volume of transactions. It does not represent gain or loss, because I'm trained in accounting and I'm very clearly aware of this fact. Whether the U.S. has been undercut in trading with China, the people who know the best are the business communities, the companies, and the consumers in the U.S. On production, China and the United States are located at different places in the global value chain and industrial chain. Generally speaking, the U.S. is located at the higher end, while China is in the middle and lower end. More often than not, Chinese companies are earning some processing profits, while the U.S. has gained a lot in designing the supplies of components and marketing. On consumption, the inexpensive quality products produced by China is extensively used by households in the United States and has diversified the consumer markets in the U.S. and has benefited U.S. consumers a lot. So the U.S. has gained more in trading with China bilaterally on the whole. And the profits of U.S. businesses are far larger than that gained by Chinese ones. Therefore, it can be said that although China is running a surplus in trade, the surplus of interests is on the U.S. side. The U.S. trade deficit with China is attributable to our different economic structures, the international division of labor, and the caliber of statistics. Fundamentally speaking, trade competitiveness means industrial competitiveness, and strong industries produce more exports. For example, on automobile, aircraft, agro products, and services, the U.S. maintains major surplus with China. In 2017, China imports $13.1 billion of automobiles from the United States, but only exports $1.4 billion of automobiles to the U.S. The surplus of U.S. trade in agro products is as high as $16.4 billion, and that in services is as high as $54 billion. The trade imbalance between our two countries is also attributable to the U.S. restrictions on exports to China. According to relevant analysis from the U.S., if it eases the restrictions on high-tech products to China for civil use, the deficit can be cut by nearly 35%. What China wants to import from the U.S., it won't sell to us. This is an important cause for the current trade imbalance between China and the U.S. China stands ready to work for greater balance of our two-way trade, and we hope that the U.S. can also demonstrate a positive attitude. The world we're living in is a global village where everyone is interconnected. The trend of economic globalization is irreversible, and so is the economic cooperation and the trend for this development. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Linda Corporal from the Australian newspaper. China is Australia's largest trading partner, and we sell LNG and meat and other products. Do you see that other third countries can perhaps benefit or perhaps have opportunities to sell more to China as a result of this trade war between the US and China?
翻译一下。
澳大利亚人报提问：中国是澳大利亚最大的。澳大利亚人报提问：中国是澳大利亚最大的贸易伙伴。澳向中国出口液化天然气以及其他重要的产品。请问，在中美贸易战的背景下，第三国是否可以从中受益，得到中国更多的出口？谢谢。向中。
谢谢你的提问。贸易战是给
Thank you for your
全
question.
球的价值链带来了破坏。
The trade war has damaged the global value chain and
美国
a negative
可以
impact
是
to global
向
trade.
中国供应 LNG 的一个重要的方面。
The U.S. is a major supplier of LNG to China,
贸易的限制
but
措
because
施
of its trade restriction measures,
也不得不采用相应的措施
China is
进
compelled
行这个应对。
to
因此呢，确实
adopt
是对美国
countermeasures.
的 LNG 的生产商来说，
Therefore, indeed, for U.S.
中
LNG
国这个重要的出
producers,
口会受到影
there
响。
will be impact
这是
for their
一
export
个
to the major
也已经表现出来。
market in China, and this has been
澳
reflected.
大利亚是
In
中国
fact,
LNG 的一个
Australia
重要的
is also an
一个来
important
源地。
source of China's LNG import, and the trading in LNG between China and Australia is pretty sizable, and there is a huge potential.
贸易谈判代表
Just as Minister Fu mentioned,
非常巨大的市场，
China
而且
is a
会
huge
进一步地
market.
开放。如果没有贸易战，
and China
这
is
个市场
ready to further expand the market. If there is no trade war,
供应国
the market
机会。
will mean even more opportunities for LNG producers. Thank you.
第一排。
谢谢主持人，我是新华社的记者。
I'm with Xinhua News Agency. My question
请
is,
问，中国经济是否能经受住
Can
中
the
美
Chinese
经贸
economy
摩擦所带来的冲击？
sustain the impact of China-US trade friction? What further measures will China take to mitigate the downward pressure on the Chinese economy?
谢谢你的提问。毫无
Thank
疑
you for
问，
your question.
美国进一步对
It goes without doubt
美国
that
的商品加征关税，
The
这会对中国经济带来
additional
一些
tariff on $200 billion of Chinese goods will have both indirect and direct impact on the Chinese economy, and certain industries and regions will be fairly severely
尽管影响
affected.
不可避免，
On the whole,
但风险是
although
长期可控。
impact is
中
unavoidable,
国经济
the
完全
risks
有
are
能力
generally under control. The Chinese economy is totally capable of cushioning the impact of the trade friction by boosting domestic demand and promoting high-quality
至少有3
development.
个方面的支
We
撑。
believe that the risks are generally under control, mainly because of 3 factors. First, the Chinese economy is resilient. Second, we have huge potential in domestic demand. Third, market entities are becoming more
首
competitive.
先是中国经济
First factor, the Chinese economy is on the whole resilient. In 2017, China's GDP reached $12.7 trillion.
对外出口达到2.26万亿
Our export was $2.26 trillion.
在我们的出口
$200 billion
占到
accounted for 8.8% of our total
如果
export.
考虑加工贸易的影响
And，if we consider factors like processing trade, the impact will be even smaller.
中国经济的一个重要特点
And a very important
是产业能
feature
力齐全
of the Chinese economy is that we have extensive industrial sectors and diversified components, and different sectors and different
在应对
entities
外部冲
can
击时，往
support
往
each
能
other
表现出很强的弹性
and replace each other's role in driving the economy. So whenever there is difficulty and challenge, the Chinese economy is always very
其实我们
resilient
经历过多
and is
次
able to cope with the challenges
外需大幅下降
successfully.
的
If you look at what has happened in the Chinese economy over the past decades, we had experienced serious tests of dwindling external demand on several occasions. However, the Chinese economy has always been able to maintain healthy growth against these challenges. In 2015, China's foreign trade, import and export dropped by 8% in U.S. terms, and in 2016, foreign trade was down by 6.8%, and both of these drop in foreign trade had weighed heavily on China's economic growth. However, by boosting domestic demand and deepening supply-side structural reform, we have succeeded in keeping economy within a proper range. Now, the Chinese economy is in a transition from high-speed growth to high-quality development. We are paying close attention to the quality of economic growth. This means we are more capable and resilient in mitigating the impact. Second factor, huge potential of domestic demand. We have a population of about 1.4 billion, which is more than the total population of developed countries. And also there is an accelerated trend of consumption upgrade. In this sense, the domestic market is filled with huge demand. At the same time, as a developing country, development is still unbalanced among different regions in China, and we also have some weak links in development. This also indicates great potential in investment, and all these have created favorable conditions for China to cope with challenges on external demand, and the statistics in the first 8 months can prove this point. The first round of tariff hike measures, with a total amount of $550 billion came into effect on July the 6th and August the 23rd, respectively. But as far as the Chinese economy is concerned, we can see that in August, industrial added value accelerated by 0.1 percentage point on both year-on-year and month-on-month terms. Total retail sales accelerated by 0.2 percentage points. In the first 8 months, manufacturing investment accelerated by 3 percentage points and 0.2 percentage point compared to the first 7 months of the year. In particular, in the first 8 months of this year, total electricity consumption expanded by 9% year-on-year, which is the highest of the same period since 2011. Third factor, growing competitiveness of market entities in China. Despite the difficulties facing foreign trade companies in China, they have enhanced their ability to cope with market changes, explore market, and pursue scientific and technological innovation in the context of declining the external demand. And they have stood the test of the market by coping with these challenges. The Party Central Committee and the State Council attach high importance to the impact of China-US trade friction and has taken a series of measures which can be characterized as 6 stability. Stability in employment, in finance, in foreign trade, in foreign investment, in investment, and in expectation. Talking about how we can mitigate the impact of the trade friction on the economy, I think it can be summarized as 3 greater efforts. First, we'll take great efforts to expand domestic demand and shore up the weak links. Second, we'll take great efforts to reduce burden and improve the environment. Third, we will take greater efforts to adjust economic structure and boost stability of Chinese businesses. First, greater efforts to expand domestic demand and shore up weak links. Recently, the Party Central Committee and the State Council have promulgated the opinions on improving and promoting consumption system and institutions and further stimulating consumption potential of the Chinese people. 15 measures have been rolled out under this document, which are mainly focused on upgrading consumption and releasing consumption potential. We have taken shore up we have taken shoring up weak links as a key task in deepening supply-side structural reform. We will take efforts to strengthen weak links in infrastructure, livelihood projects, public services, agriculture and ecological protection industries. In particular, we will give greater play to the role of private investment and boost the confidence of private investors. Second, greater efforts to reduce business burdens and improve the environment. In order to support companies in better coping with the challenges, China will take further efforts to reduce tax burden on the businesses. We will introduce further tax cuts and a cut in administrative fees. We will reform government functions with greater efforts, further improve business environment, expand opening up with greater intensity. And these policies will be equally applied to both domestic and foreign-owned companies. We will unswervingly guide, support and encourage the development of private economy and stabilize market expectation. Third, we will take great efforts to adjust the economic structure and boost the ability of businesses. We will make a great efforts to support companies in exploring the international market. We will enhance mutually beneficial cooperation with Europe, Japan, Russia, ASEAN, and African countries under the Belt and Road framework, diversified foreign trade market, and at the same time, we will encourage companies to build up their capability to cope with market changes. We will improve the structure of foreign trade products, develop diversified market products, and help companies boost their innovation capability and core competitiveness with the goal of achieving high-quality development. So all in all, the Chinese economy has huge potential and resilience. We are fully capable of offsetting the impact of China-US trade friction by boosting domestic demand and promoting high-quality development. We have the confidence, ability, and the condition to ensure the Chinese economy will continue to stay on a steady course. Thank you.
谢谢，我是美国有线电视 CNN 的
CNN。
那最近很多人从这个中国官方媒体的一些社论也好、评论也好，
Well, recently, people can reach a conclusion from the official comments of Chinese newspapers that this trade war and this trade measures taken by President Trump is not just a measure on tariff, but more of a strategic move taken by the U.S. administration to contain China's rise. And we're also hearing in the United States there is a consensus among Republican Democrat Party that China is a strategic rival of the United States. So in this context, do you believe that the trade war is an intractable problem, no matter how many rounds of negotiations and consultations conducted, they just cannot work, and they're just meaningless?
这个之所以我们中国政府要发布这个白皮书
The reason that the Chinese government has issued this white paper
就是从中美这个中美建交以后的历史过程当中
is that given experience of the development of China-US relations since the establishment of diplomatic ties,
各自得到的福利。
we
当然，建交40年，
can
我们有
see that both countries have benefited from this relationship.
也遇到过许许多多的困难
And of course,
和曲折。
in the development of China-US relations, there were ups and downs and various setbacks.
无论是美国也好，中国也好，
However, over the past 4 decades,
你无论是经济的总量和规模也好，
both China and the
还
United
是具体到每
States,
一个老百姓的福祉也好，
either in terms of aggregate economic size
得到了明显的改善。
the tangible benefits delivered to every individual Chinese American people, we can see that this relationship has really delivered benefits to both countries. That being said, China is a populous country, and in the past, China's per capita GDP and per capita income was relatively low. So maybe if you look at the per capita GDP and per capita income of the Chinese people, the increase is bigger than that of the United States over the past 40 years. But we should not forget the U.S. has been an industrialized country for a long time. And we should not forget that despite the ups and turns, twists and turns, China-U.S. relations have continued to move forward in a positive direction, and both peoples have benefited from this growing relationship. So the problem now is, what is the right view about China? Or what should be the right view about China? I think some experts or some people in the world still have a misunderstanding about China. The Chinese government has put forward this concept, 3 critical battles, and one of them is to eliminate poverty. Why? Because we still have tens of millions of people living in poverty in China. Eliminating poverty is a common task for all humanity. Without development in China, it is impossible for us to lift tens of millions of people out of poverty. But we also understand that in order to promote development and eliminate poverty, we need to pursue reform and opening up. We need to develop China in the context of economic globalization. So the problem is that some people are just looking at the aggregate size of China's economy, China's foreign trade, but they have neglected the fact that China is still quite low in per capita GDP and per capita income. Vice Minister Wang of Commerce and I are both working on China's external relations and also on some of the domestic issues in China. Sometimes when we pay a visit to the central and the western regions, we really thought that it was quite an experience for us. There was one time last year I visited Guangxi province or Guangxi autonomous region. I went there on my own without the company of local officials, and I walked into a village and I met with a veteran soldier who fought in the Korean War. And the conditions in his family are very poor. In his house, there's no furniture. They do not even have a bed. They sleep on the floor. And they do not have a proper meal. They can only have some porridge for meal. What touched me was that the veteran soldier presented me a medal he got from the in the Korean
我
War,
们是想让那些穷人
and
尽快脱贫。
I was so moved that I
我在
shed
全中国人民一道，
tears.
全世界人民一道。
And
地球村
the experience of this veteran soldier is one example
才的共同的
of the need
还是
to promote common
相互
prosperity
遏制，让
in
穷人
China
更穷，
and in the world.
让
So whether we
富
should fight a war to hurt each other's interests or to bring prosperity to all people,
所以我以为啊，
I think the choice is all too obvious.
对中国的遏制也好，所谓的贸易战也好，
In this sense,
这不是
the
人类
so-called strategy of containing China
发展的方向和未来。
or trade war does not represent the
纵
direction
观历史，
of
战争
the
也好，
development of human
贸易战也好，
society.
都是要付出代价的。
If you look at history,
代价
war in all forms, either trade war
是人民。
or a real war, will come with a huge price, and it will be the people that suffer in the end. Thank you.
谢谢凤凰卫视记者提问，想问一下，根据报道，中方是
Phoenix TV.
提出的
It was reported that
中方是
the Chinese side has already rejected the U.S. call for talks. So what is your comment?
贸易谈判最快什么时候可以重启？谢谢。
And what is the earliest date for the possible resumption of the trade talks?
什么时候能够
Thank you for your question.
中美
Whether
高
when
级别
the
的经贸磋商
high-level
完全取决于美方
trade
的。
consultations between China and the U.S. can be resumed, it is
我们中方
purely
对磋商、对谈
the
判、解决
initiative
经贸
of the United
关系的
States.
大门是敞开的。
Our door is open to the resumption of trade consultations and negotiations. But to make the negotiations effective,
平等对待，
First,
相互尊重。
it should be based on mutual respect and
美方
treating each other as
采取了这
equals.
么大的贸易限制措施，
Now the U.S.
就
has
是说把
conducted
刀架在别人的脖子
so
上，
large trade restrictive measures. It is like pointing a gun to our head.
谈
And
判
how can we negotiate with them? It will not be an equal
谈
one.
判磋商
Secondly,
一定要有诚意，真实
For the
落
consultations to happen, there has to be
高级别的
sincerity
磋商
and trustworthiness. We have already held 4 rounds of high-level trade
是没
consultations.
有用的。这些磋商
These consultations
取得了
cannot be said as useless, and we have reached a lot of common understanding, and we have even
但是
published a joint statement.
出尔反尔，
However, the
抛弃
U.S.
这个共识，
has reneged on
贸易的一些限制措施，
their commitments and has taken restrictive measures on trade,
所以我
which
想
has
强调
led to the failure of the
只要
consultations.
有诚意，只要在
Therefore,
谈判中平
What I
等
want to
相
say
待
is that as long as there is sincerity, as long as there is trustworthiness, then there will be a way out for the negotiations. Thank you.
谢谢主持人。香港大公文汇传媒记者提问，我们想问，
Thank you,
说
with
中国的这个补贴政策
Takun
究竟是否
Media.
符合 WTO 的相关规定，是否会造成
My
不公
question
平竞
is,
争？谢谢。
is China's subsidy policy in line with WTO rules, and is it tantamount to unfair competition? Thank you.
在市场经济条件下，
Thank you for your question.
政府用来应对市场需求、纠正发展的推
Under market rules, subsidy is a tool of the government
它在包
to
括
redress market failures and imbalance, and it is widely used by all countries, including the United States. But of course, it should follow relevant rules. China is a member of the WTO, and our subsidy is fully in line with WTO rules. The WTO has 3 categories for subsidies. First is prohibited subsidies, which is basically for export and
也就是说，有可能
import
对贸易造成一定的扭
credit.
曲和不公平，
The
有可能
second
损害成员国的利益。
is
成员国呢，可以
actionable
诉诸
subsidy
WTO 的争端
that
解决
could
机制
be detrimental to WTO members and that can be
主要指的是
actioned in the WTO framework. And third is non-actionable subsidy, which is basically used for research and development and for the support of underdeveloped areas in the country and for ecological and environmental protection. After China's accession to the WTO, we have always been working actively for the compliance reform of Chinese rules and regulations. And our subsidies now features the main part of non-actionable subsidies with the supportive role of actionable subsidies. And we have abolished prohibited subsidies across the board. And in the WTO subsidies and countervailing measure agreement, there are relevant stipulations. For example, in accordance with the WTO transparency principle on subsidies, China gives notification to the WTO on the amendment and implementation of relevant rules and regulations regularly. And we have already submitted over 1,000 notifications to the WTO. And the latest one was in July this year, during which we submitted the notification for the central and local subsidies of China in 2015 and 2016, which covers all the provincial administrative regions of China. Of course, China has been reforming and improving our subsidy policies, and we are doing that today. I'm not saying that China's subsidy policy is perfect. There still needs to be further improvement, but all in all, our subsidies will be non-actionable on the whole, and we will minimize our use of actionable subsidies. For example, on agriculture, previously we had so-called amber box subsidies. For example, the subsidies for crop farmer, for agro-materials, and for fine species of agricultural plantation. And these three subsidies have been abolished and replaced by subsidies for the support of soil fertility and proper scale operation, so as to promote sustainable development. Also, on cutting over capacity, we have set up a special fund for the industrial structural adjustment of companies, which is used for the settlement of affected employees. This is also a non-actionable subsidy. So all in all, China is strictly honoring our WTO pledges, and the level and the means of China's subsidy has not exceeded the scope that is stipulated by the WTO and has not led to market distortion and unfair competition. This said, as long as we have discovered any local subsidies that are illegal, we will absolutely hold them accountable. Thank you.
Global Times. My question is about the impact on the global industrial chain of the tariff increase by the United States. If foreign companies relocate to other countries, what will be its impact on China's role in the international industrial chain and division of labor? Thank you for your question. The U.S. tariff increase on Chinese goods will have a major impact on the global industrial chain, which is mainly threefold. First, it has severed the links between the industries of different countries and aroused the risk of fragmenting the global industrial chain. As you know, under the conditions of economic globalization, all countries or all economies are deeply integrated in the global industrial chain. The countries no longer engage in a simple form of trading goods, but make use of a global production network to complete R&D, designs, processing, production, logistics, transportation, and the marketing of products. The industries of all countries are mutually dependent and deeply integrated, and it's fair to say that they rise and fall together. The tariff increase by the United States has disrupted the normal international division of labor, resulting in a mismatch between upstreams and downstreams in certain industries, and run the risk of leading to a fragmentation of the global industry chain. Second, it has undermined the existing international trade rules and lead to a disorderly development of the global industrial chain. As you know, the existing international trading rules with WTO as a basis are the bedrock of global economic growth. The unilateral and protectionist practices of the United States have forced countries to take countermeasures. As of July this year, in addition to China, major U.S. trading partners like the European Union, Canada, and Mexico have also taken countermeasures. So the risk of a global trade war is visibly on the rise. Against this background, the international trade rules may be disrupted or even upended. Without the foundational support of international trade rules, the global industrial chain will become more disorderly. Third, it has reduced the efficiency of international economic operation and runs the risk of an inefficient global industrial chain. The tariff increase measures by the United States has made an impact on normal trading products and resource allocation on a global scale and dampened the efficiency of international economic operation. In April this year, the IMF pointed out in its World Economic Outlook report that the rising tariff and non-tariff trade barriers will undermine global value chain, hold back the proliferation of new technologies, and result in lower productivity in investment, escalating the risk of an inefficient global industrial chain. That is my answer to your first question. Secondly, relating to your question about the relocation of foreign companies, we believe that cross-border investment and business relocation are the voluntary commercial behaviors of companies as they allocate resources on a global scale. For any single country, in and out of companies happen on a daily basis, which is totally not natural, and it is also an inevitable outcome of economic globalization. It is true that the trade friction provoked by the United States may cause some disruptions and impact on some Chinese companies, and some foreign companies may choose to move to other countries in order to diffuse risks and lower costs. And we need to take a sensible view about this problem. First, we will not shy away from the problem and take more proactive measures to help companies address the difficulties. We will continue to advance reform of government functions, lower tax burdens on the businesses, and continue to improve the business environment. Second, we will not exaggerate the problem, and we will be confident in China's market potential and industrial network. As you know, China has a big market, and we have a complete industrial system which offers enormous space for development of businesses. So most of the foreign companies will continue to choose to stay in China and grow their business together with the Chinese economy. Some companies are taking active steps to further explore the Chinese market. As you know, Tesla has recently decided to set up its first super factory outside the United States in Shanghai. Thirdly, we will continue to further open up in accordance with our own pace. We will stick to the direction of market-oriented reform, open wider to the outside world, and materialize the various measures announced by the Chinese government on further opening up. We believe that more and more foreign companies will come to China to invest in this country, and also believe that most of the foreign companies that are already operating in China will continue to develop their business in this country.
Hi, Matthew Boesler with Bloomberg. What is your understanding of what negotiators on the U.S. side wish to see from China in this dispute? Thank you.
我是彭博新闻社的记者。在您看来，美国的谈判者对于中美经贸谈判、中美经贸摩擦有什么样的期望？他们希望从谈判中得到怎样的结果？
这个中美啊，已经进行了4轮的高级别的磋商。我刚刚已经。
China and the United States have already held 4 rounds of high-level consultations. And as I said, a great deal of consensus had been reached through these consultations, and we also issued a joint statement together. However, rather unfortunately, despite the consensus reached by the two sides, the U.S. side has continued to take measures that are inconsistent with the promises and pledges they have made. These measures have not only harmed the interests of China-U.S. trade, but also harmed the interests of American workers, farmers, and consumers. Other WTO members are also worried about this. We just don't understand why the United States reneged on its words despite the agreement reached by the two sides. As a matter of fact, the trade war measures taken by the United States has not delivered any gains to the United States. The United States is an important source of agricultural imports for China. However, in the first 7 months of this year, China's imports from other countries, including Brazil and Australia, has grown substantially in the agricultural sector, while the increase in agricultural imports from the United States has only made modest increase. In terms of automobiles, the United States used to be the biggest supplier of auto products in China. But now Germany has already overtaken the United States to be the largest supplier of automobiles in the Chinese market. Automobiles made in Japan and made in Germany are both increasing their sales in the Chinese market, but the sales of American automobiles is declining. The trade measures taken by the United States have failed to reduce a trade deficit the United States is facing worldwide. So the U.S. trade deficit is increasing not just against China, but also on a global scale. So these measures are not in the interest of China and not in the interest of the United States either. Stopping a trade war is the only way out. Trade frictions between China and the United States are natural for China-U.S. trade with a total size of $700 billion. As long as the two sides follow the principle of equal consultation and credibility, I think there will be a way out for our negotiations.
谢谢中新社的记者。想请问，就是美国
From ChinaUS Agency.
中国知识产权保护不力，在某种意义
The
上
U.S. administration is accusing China of lack of IPR protection and of emboldening theft of U.S. IPRs. So my question is, how will China further strengthen protection of IPR, especially those from foreign companies? Thank you for your question. First, let me make it clear. The accusation against China's lack of IPR protection is totally groundless. It pays no regard to the progress China has made in the system of IPR protection, the progress of China's innovation power, and the fact that China has become a major country of IPR. On the protection of IPR, our attitude is clear. President Xi Jinping, in his speech to the Boao Forum for Asia, said that IPR protection is one of the 4 major measures of China's widening of opening up. And Premier Li Keqiang, in his opening remarks in the 2018 Summer Davos, said that China will enforce more strict system of IPR protection so that the violators will have to suffer costs that they cannot afford, and so that innovators can rest assured to innovate. And China has realistic needs for the protection of IPR. We are now at a stage of fast-growing innovation capacity and the fast development of innovation companies. In the Global Innovation Index report issued in July this year by WIPO and Cornell University, China was ranked 17th in the world, which was 5 notches higher than last year. And this was the first time that China has made it to top 20 of global innovative economies. Last year, nearly 90% of the patent applicants in China are from China itself. And China has made 10,000 PCT patent applications, which was ranked 2nd in the world. And in the first half of this year, China applied for 80% of the invention patents issued in China. Therefore, to strengthen and accelerate the building of IPR protection system is what China's development calls for. On the other hand, to strengthen IPR protection, what China has already achieved is recognizable by all over the world. China gives equal protection to Chinese and foreign IPRs, and China has been extensively recognized by its protection of foreign IPRs. I can give you some numbers for the real effects of China's protection of IPR. In the past 5 years, invention patent applications and trademark applications in China were respectively 650,000 and 840,000 respectively, up by 3.1% and 10.3% respectively. This number is unimaginable in a country that lacks IPR protection. Secondly, in the polling of the satisfaction for IPR protection carried out this year, the number on average is 76.69. But the grade for foreign-owned companies in China is 76.94, which is higher than the average. And for joint ventures, it's 80.16, which is clearly higher than the average. And this shows that foreign-owned companies and joint ventures in China are pretty satisfied with China's IPR protection. The third number is from an essay in the Diplomat magazine, which shows that for the patent right violation cases sued filed in China, the winning rate is 80%. Which means that China has become a preferred place for IPR lawsuits or by multinational companies. The fourth number is that in 2017, the payment for the use of IPR made by China was $28.6 billion US, and the surplus is the largest against the United States, which is as high as $5.07 billion US. If there is not a fairly good environment for IPR protection in China, then it would be groundless for us to have the numbers of these IPR royalties. In the next step, we will strengthen IPR protection in 4 areas. First is strict protection. We are now advancing the amendment to the patent law and copyright law, and will introduce punitive compensation systems. And second is greater protection. That is, apart from administrative and judicial protection, we are setting up new channels like arbitration and settlement to form a greater framework of protection. Third is fast protection. We have set up 19 IPR protection centers, which are more efficient in the protection of IPR. For example, it takes 7 to 8 working days to implement administrative settlement orders. Fourth is equal protection. For Chinese and foreign, for big and small businesses, they will enjoy equal protection of IPR. I'm sure that you have a keen feeling of the protection of IPR in China, and every year we hold the Publicity Week activities for IPR protection. And we have press briefings for IPR protection here as well.
你好，我是俄罗斯媒体和通塔斯市记者。我有一个提问，
With Itatas, and my question is, with international platforms like BRICS and SCO, China is working with partners like Russia to promote trade. Will this compensate the loss that China suffered from the trade war with the United States?
这个中俄啊，战略合作伙伴关系。
China and Russia have a comprehensive strategic partnership for coordination. And this serves as a good framework for our cooperation and exchanges. We also have very smooth channels for dialogue, which are also very effective. Particularly, we have held the SCO Qingdao Summit in China, during which leaders have reached extensive consensus on our future development. China and Russia enjoy a high level of complementarity. What is important is that it is based on the firm political mutual trust between our two countries. With the complementarity in place, our cooperation and exchanges are in line with the fundamental interests of our two countries and two peoples. With the guidance of the leaders of our two countries, we will be able to overcome all sorts of disturbances and difficulties, and continue to take China-Russia relations to a higher level of sound development. Thank you.
谢谢主持人给这个提问的机会。在这场我也想问一个关于中方企业的问题。我是深圳卫视的
深圳 Satellite TV。
其实我们也关注到，关于到这一次中美经贸摩擦，我们看到很多其实一些中美双边贸易的一些中方企业，率先受到了波及。
We can see that it is those Chinese companies that are deeply involved in China-US trade that are bearing the front. For example, companies in the coastal regions like Shenzhen and ZTE are one particular case. So the question to you all is, what specific advices can you give to these companies to better cope with this friction?
不仅仅中国的企业不喜欢贸易战，美国的企业
I think all companies dislike trade war, not just Chinese companies, but also American companies, workers, farmers, and consumers.
带来的损害不仅仅
Trade wars
企业，美国的企业
brings damage to companies all around the world, not just Chinese, American companies, but also companies from all other countries because of this global industrial chain.
这个林伟良主任已经讲到，
Just now,
中国中央政府已经
Vice Chairman Liang Weiliang already introduced
企业的
6 specific measures the Chinese government is going to take to provide better business conditions for companies.
对风险要有
On top of that, I believe companies need to be better prepared for potential risks and challenges.
这种风险是难免的。
Risks like those are inevitable for companies that explore the global market. What's important is for companies to boost their own competitiveness, diversify their exports. So, on the part of the government, we need to create a better environment for companies, better business and production environment at home. And at the same time, companies need to build up the U.S. administration have damaged the interests of Chinese American companies and consumers, and also added to the risk of the global industry chain. But for Chinese companies, we have always been able to make progress despite the difficulties and challenges. There's no obstacle that is insurmountable. We also have conditions to help these companies get over the difficulties. In terms of the statistics of the first half of this year, the operation of SMEs are generally smooth. Value added has increased by 7%. Principal business revenue increased by 9.5%, and profits increased by 11.4%. Going forward, we'll continue to expand domestic demand, leverage our market advantage, and encourage SMEs to become more specialized in their operation and competitive. And we're also going to support SMEs in taking part in Belt and Road Cooperation and explore markets in Belt and Road countries. And thirdly, we will take vigorous efforts to reduce tax burdens on SMEs to stimulate their vitality. Just now, Vice Chairman Lian also introduced some of the measures to be taken by the central government. Macau Daily. The United States has accused China of forced technology transfer on numerous occasions. What is your comment on that? Thank you for your question. The white paper has provided lengthy information about this, and I will also give you some further interpretation. So to answer this question, we need to first understand one concept: who is forcing who to transfer technology?
In Chinese laws and regulation, there is no stipulation for any forced technology transferring. And if you have any information on that, please let me know. And plus, to prevent government departments from pressuring foreign enterprises for technology transference, this year, the Chinese State Council issued regulation demanding that all government departments shall not use administrative means to force technology transference. Therefore, for foreign companies to export to China, our door is open. There is no obstacle. And it is also okay for them to sell their technologies to China on a voluntary basis. There is no obstacle. But if companies are investing in China and they accuse Chinese government of pressuring on them for forced technology transferring, in most sectors, foreign companies can establish independently owned companies in China, and there's no issue of technology transferring. You can go over our negative list of investment. It is shorter and shorter. Indeed, there is a few industries that call for joint venture. And this point has been accepted by the US, the EU, and Japan when China was doing negotiations for the WTO accession. And China has the right to demand joint venture in some sectors. It is not just China. Many developed countries and more developing countries have such requirements. If you want to come to the local market, then you have to form joint venture. But does joint venture necessarily mean forced technology transferring? Some companies say that we will have to transfer our technologies, otherwise there will be no joint venture. But this is not forced technology transfer, because when you are negotiating for a deal, you want to have a good offering for your technology, because with a no good offer, you will not transfer your technologies. So you must have already got a good deal. And the deal is made between foreign companies and their Chinese partners. They are equal members of the market. And the negotiations are based on contract. And this is the equal-footed consultation between enterprises. There is no government's role, and there is no government enforcement. And many foreign companies are operating very good in China. The U.S. auto company Ford is building more cars in China than in the United States. And their profit is bigger than that in the U.S. Just now, Director He Hua of China's Intellectual Property Office said that those who are most satisfied with our IPR protection is the joint venture companies. Some people say that, can you just lift the requirement for joint venture? Let me make it clear. We are now abolishing more and more areas that require joint venture. And this year, the negative list for foreign investment and for pilot free trade zones have timetable For sectors like automobiles, aircraft, shipbuilding, and design, they have requirements for the abolishment of joint venture, and for finance, for securities and insurance, there will also be similar requirements for the abolishment. And this said, it is not just China who have such joint venture requirements. There are also other countries who have this practice. So we need multilateral and bilateral negotiations for the joint venture requirements. So it cannot be used as an excuse for trade wars. Let me also remind everyone that some countries are now conducting prohibited forced technology transferring. They are ordering that certain technologies cannot be exported. This is what forced actually means. When these companies want to sell technologies to China, their governments do not allow that. And when Chinese companies are investing in their countries, their governments are prohibiting these businesses. So let me draw the attention from all of you for these prohibited forced technology transferring. In the interest of time, the last question.
谢谢，我是中央广电总台央广记者。想请问一下商务部负责人，商务部是否有一个评估或者是预判，此轮中美经贸摩擦会对今年我国外贸的发展产生多大程度的影响？
the impact of the trade frictions to China's foreign trade this year.
谢谢啊。据中国海关统计。
Thank you for your question. According to China Customs, in the first 8 months of this year, China's export and import amount to $3.02 trillion US dollars, up by 16.1%. Export was 1.6 trillion US dollars, up by 12.2%, and import 1.41 trillion, up by 20.9%. These numbers show that in this year, China's imports and exports have maintained a trend of progress amid stability. The structure has been constantly improved, and the quality and efficiency are also performing well. This shows that in recent years, the economic reform featuring supply-side structural reform, as well as China's policy measures for further opening up, have fortified the competitiveness of Chinese businesses globally. Although there have been some disruptions and trade frictions, this trend of ensuring stability while pursuing progress is maintained.
现在看来啊，贸易摩擦的形势还在进一步升级。
Well, indeed, the trade frictions are
外贸企业面临
still
的
escalating,
国际环境
and the global environment that foreign trade companies are facing is becoming worse.
怎么来在这么一个背景下，
Against this context,
保持中国经济持续健康稳定的发展？
how can we maintain the sustained and sound development of the Chinese economy? Foreign trade is of paramount importance. Therefore, the central government of China has decided to take a series of policy measures to maintain the steady progress of foreign trade and help companies overcome the difficulties. Let me also make it clear that any policies that China adopts supporting foreign trade are consistent with WTO rules. For example, China may be further raising the rate of export tax deduction, because in the past the deduction rate was not as high as the legally stipulated value-added tax level. And we are now considering the helping relevant foreign trade companies to enter global market with zero tariff. Also, foreign companies face risks when entering emerging markets. In accordance with global common practices, we will use more export credit insurance tools to help companies fend off the risks. I'm sure that relevant measures will be adopted pretty soon. I believe as long as we always stay committed to economic globalization, stay committed to trade liberalization, and stay committed to upholding the multilateral trading regime, so that in this world we're living in and in the global multilateral trading system there can be order. In this way, the trend for Chinese companies to go global will be irreversible. The Chinese people and the people from the rest of the world are working together to build a community with a shared future for mankind, not only for the prosperity and peace in China, but also for peace and stability in the whole world. And this is an achievable future. Thank you. If you have more questions, you can send emails to the State Council Information Office, and we will be holding more press briefings in the near future. This is the end of today's news briefing. Thank you.